Hi everyone in cloud computing, and welcome to episode 15 of the Cloud Computing Australia show with Brad Nelson and the world's #1 cloud industry expert and thought leader, David Linthicum. This show is sponsored by Nelson Hilliard, cloud computing recruitment specialists, placing great people in cloud, IoT, fintech and AI. This week we are excited to have James Staten as our special guest. James is the global head of marketing at Equinix, one of the world's largest data center providers. James is a cloud expert with 20 years experience in marketing, business development and corporate strategy. Hi Dave and James, a warm welcome to both of you. It's exciting to have you both on the Australia show this week.
It's great to be here. It's great to have James on as well. He was a great podcast guest. Now it's good to have him on video.
Yeah, it's great to connect with both of you guys. And I run market development globally, and it is a really exciting part of our business because we have expanded like crazy across the globe.
It's really great to have you both on there and looking forward to a great show this week. In fact, we're talking about a hot topic that's coming up, I believe, on the 25th of May that's going to affect a lot of people. So will GDPR affect cloud computing in Australia, James?
Yeah, it absolutely will. While it is coming out of the European Union, it does apply to European citizens wherever they are. And so if your company has European citizens who work for you, who are customers of you, and you gather and hold any personally identifiable information about them, you need to be compliant with GDPR. And when the European Union decides to sue the first company for failing to be compliant, you can probably count on them not suing a European company first. And that'll be the way that they really reinforce that this is a global application that we need to pay attention to.
So James, are you seeing a lot of demand for this right now within your customer base? In other words, I have a lot of questions around it. Is it a big kind of focus, or is it like, well, I have hundreds of them we're typically dealing with in the finance and healthcare world, but this seems to be a little bit more complicated than the ones in the past, and it's going to take some technology prowess to get it right for a lot of these companies. So what are you telling them?
Yeah, so we are seeing a lot of interest in this, especially since January, when people started to realize we're now only 5 months away from this going into place. And we're seeing this across almost every industry because everybody who's got a digital part of their business is storing information about their customers and their employees. And so they have to be compliant with these rules. And if you read the details about the GDPR, if you fail to comply, then they have the right to fine you up to $20 million or 4% of your annual global revenues for violating GDPR. So that kind of gets the attention of most CFOs and most chief security officers, that they have to pay attention to this. So yeah, we're seeing pretty much everybody starting to worry about this. What's interesting also too is that since the real driver for why every company just pays attention to this is their digital business, they have to start thinking about, how do I ensure compliance when my digital business is partly running in the cloud, is partly tapping into SaaS services? Do I have control, and do they have control over my information? And what a lot of companies need to realize is, just because you're using a cloud service and that cloud service might be GDPR compliant, more often than not, those cloud services will give you controls. And if you don't set up those controls so that you're compliant with GDPR, just the simple fact that they provided those controls is not good enough. And that means that you also need to realize that if you misconfigure the cloud configurations and you make that data vulnerable, when you get sent to court, sued by the GDPR, don't count on that cloud vendor to sit right next to you.
So is this something, if I'm an Australian company and I do business with lots of European companies, should this be a huge priority right now since we're 5 months away? Should this be, semi-important? Should this be, how should we prioritize this for a very busy IT department that's in essence trying to make sure that we use the right colo provider, right cloud provider, use the right own infrastructure to make sure that we're going to be compliant going forward?
Yeah, so IT departments really should be making this a priority for a couple of the reasons that I mentioned already. They don't want to be subject to being sued for this. And this really is something that should be thought about as a really good practice for protecting personally identifiable information about your customers' employees, because there are Asian countries who apparently are looking at the GDPR rules and thinking about applying them to their country as well. So this may become a universal standard or something as a base point for universal rules across the globe for doing this. So if you are not already looking at how can I make sure I'm protected, you really should be making that a priority right now. And that's something that Equinix is really focused on as well. And we have created a privacy office in our European office, which is training all of our global systems integrators, so that when you work with us, you will have technical people who can help you set up the right architecture to be GDPR compliant. And part of what that means is making sure that all the aspects of the protection you put around this personally identifiable information is properly protected. And it starts with the physical assets in which you store that information. And almost everybody who's thinking cloud, thinks about the virtual assets. Well, those virtual assets are not just living in a 100% virtual world. They're actually sitting on servers, on storage devices in physical locations. And so you really want to start from the very beginning there and make sure that you are compliant with GDPR. And then what the IT department needs to do is understand, what do I need to do on top of this now? What are the services and capabilities that the different cloud services provide to me? What are the configurations that I have to do correct so that I'm compliant? And then, do I really want to put certain private information into the hands and trust it to a third-party cloud provider or SaaS provider to hold on to that? Or should I put it in my own data center facility, in my own co-location cage, where I have 100% control? And then, can I use some cloud neutral or carrier neutral services to protect that data and ensure that that data stays right there, even though it taps into those applications and those services? But if someone comes after me to try and attack it, I know that I've got full control and I have set all the rules for it. That's what a lot of companies need to pay attention to. And the other thing to pay attention to is when you're going to connect to and share with those cloud services, and you're probably also going to share this information with members of your ecosystem. You might need to share it with government agencies and so on. You are allowed to share according to GDPR rules, but everyone you share it with, they have to be compliant as well with GDPR. So you need to start asking your partners and asking your ecosystem, are they compliant? If you're not, guess what? You're not getting this data. And then you need to look at, how do you connect to those services? Because if you look at the reports from Gartner and Forrester and other firms, we're seeing that the majority of the attacks that are happening from hackers are coming to connections that are over the public internet. And you have the option in the co-location world as well as in the cloud world to use private direct connections between your cloud services and your co-location cages, something we call interconnection. If you're on a private connection, the chances of being hacked are much lower than they were if you were using the public internet. And so you really want to look at, okay, out of all the services I do business with and all of the members of the ecosystem I do business with, who can I do a private connection to? This will really help me ensure that personally identifiable information that is subject to GDPR compliance is protected.
So let's talk to the guy who's actually standing in Australia. So, well, Brad, you're physically in Australia. So are you hearing a lot about GDPR amongst your clients and the candidates out there? And is this becoming a priority?
So GDPR is a big deal if you've got people that are based in Australia but UK citizens. Obviously there's a breach there because it's a citizen-based protection as opposed to based geographically. So there's a major problem there for many companies, and certainly in recruitment especially there's issues around contacting people and gathering data, etc. And you have to be very mindful of how you go about doing that. Unfortunately, because I produce the content, great content in blogs and stuff, people come to me, so that's great. So in that respect, but with regards to data and companies, there's there's massive fear factors out there with regards to, you know, how clean is their data currently? Is it going to be usable after, you know, the 25th of May 2018? Because, you know, they really are in a precarious position if that data hasn't been cleaned thoroughly. So, you know, like James said, you really do need to seek a lawyer to go through exactly where your stance is and have some idea of cleaning the data that's going to geographically clear the citizens, at least, because Australia has its own privacy 1988 laws, which do obviously stipulate certain things, but nothing to the level that GDPR does. In fact, there's if I can just highlight something that's happened in the UK in the last sort of year or so, there's been an airline that sent out, I think, over 3.3 million emails to its current database, although there were people included on that database that had actually unsubscribed initially to that database, and they were asking and incentivizing people, you know, to get back in touch, or would they be interested in this, and if they did, then there'd be a chance to win a pair of tickets or something. They actually got fined, I think, over £10 million. Just for you know, sending in effect a marketing email to requalify an unsubscribed database. So you know, it really, the big money's branded out there, and a UK pub chain called JD Witherspoons have done such an amazing thing, really. Certainly in my opinion, and I'm sure, you know, most companies wouldn't sneeze at this, but they deleted 650,000 emails. And their stance on that was that we just don't trust it. You know, it's one of those things that, how can we verify where that data's come from over a period of time where, non-consensual verification wasn't required in that respect. So instead of leaving themselves wide open, they pressed the delete button on 650,000 emails. And their stance was, well, we'd rather, communicate with people of clean data that want to communicate with the brand and that want to interact with the brand. So it was a very interesting stance on that. But I think, going back to your initial question, there's a lot of fear in Australia around this, and recruitment companies all over the place are definitely having to drill down into their data and find out how they can, requalify it, or whether it's through social, LinkedIn, etc. So there's different fear factors and pressure points around this.
That's really the reason why we're seeing so many people want to use private interconnections to those kinds of services. Because if you integrate cloud-neutral security and compliance services co-located adjacent to your interconnection points and those services you're using, that enables private data exchange between users and businesses that can help improve compliance capabilities.
So James, what kind of penalties can we see actually reach across country borders? Because wouldn't this be hard to enforce within an Australian company, since this is kind of a European-based rule and regulation, short of the adoption by the rest of the world? So how would this work in terms of leveraging penalties across borders?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Since the EU has said that they are going to have the ability to fine companies up to 20 million, or 4% of their annual global revenues, what is going to be their ability to sue a company that's not within the bounds of the EU? It could be that they would figure out if you've got a European division and then sue them. It could be that they then would cooperate with the Australian government themselves, as an example, and say, hey, can you guys help us? You've got companies that are putting our citizens at risk. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But that's a really good question, because I'm sure there are a lot of companies that only have offices in Australia who are saying to themselves, oh, well, they won't be able to come after me. I wouldn't be trusting that that's going to be the case.
No, exactly.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Think of all the major companies, and most of them do have a presence in Europe. Is that correct, Brad?
Yeah, I think a lot of the large recruitment arms in the UK. I'm just picking recruitment because that's my niche. But I think a lot of companies do, obviously, across the globe with regards to offices. So you've got a lot of divisions of companies in Australia that are in the UK and in Europe. So as long as they fall within that Europe remit, they've got potential problems if they don't get sorted out, like James said.
Yeah, and the one positive thing that we should keep in mind about GDPR, this is an attempt to do a standard set of rules across all the European countries, because as you guys probably know, there's some rules in Germany, some rules in Ireland, some rules in India, in France and other countries, and it makes it very hard to meet all those rules. This hopefully, if it does become a standard outside the EU where Asian countries take it on, it could make compliance and security a lot easier for all of us. Because we have to realize, and we all already do, every company is global. If you've got a mobile app, if you've got a website, there's a good chance anybody in any country is using your app.
Yeah, I guess we have to live in a global economy now and work and play well with all kinds of rules and regulations. And it really is. And me focusing on the cloud business right now, I spend probably a fourth of my time with clients, dealing with rules, regulations, understanding different local issues, privacy issues, things like that. Because and it's almost like I need a lawyer on the cloud team as well to kind of international to understand all these things going forward. So this is going to get more complicated over the next 10 years. Do you agree, James?
It is absolutely going to get more complicated. 100% agree. Yeah, and especially as we start to head down the path of the digital edge applications and services that we're starting to see, such as manufactured devices that have sensors in them, and we're going to start gathering IoT data from all of these devices. A good bit of that information that's going to be in there is who owns the device. Now you've got personally identifiable information, which is potentially at risk.
Yeah, it's going to be lots of moving parts going forward, and it's going to be interesting to kind of watch this space. So, folks out there listening to this video cast, come back, anytime we talk about this, because I guarantee it's going to be evolving fairly quickly. Back to you, Brad.
Yes, no, I think this week on the Australia show, we've really covered some ground on this. It is an evolving economy, ecosystem, as it were. That's just someone said, "Are you GDPR compliant?" And it's like, well, that isn't something that is a static form of compliance. It's an ongoing thing. So it's a constant regulatory thing that people are going to have to get their head around, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on people. But equally, I think it's going to consummate a lot of belief and security and trust with brands that their data isn't being misused, and it's going to build relationships because they're going to have, at least the consumer or the end user is going to have that belief that they know their data is going to be secure. And if they don't, they can really kick up a fuss, ask to see the data, get it removed. Certainly from a recruitment point of view, the ATCs or the applicant tracking systems that recruitment companies run, one of the fears around that from a recruitment point of view, or a bugbear, should I say, from a candidate point of view, would be their name is marked on the system that they, say for argument's sake, were unsuccessful or didn't comply to this or didn't do this. So they're tracked, obviously. They can now ask to be removed, and that delete button can be, forget me kind of thing. So they can then be, because their data can be removed, they're now a fresh applicant into a system. So it's from a recruitment point of view, this is what I've read recently. It will turn it on its head with regards to applicants or candidates being put forward for something that they wouldn't have necessarily been put forward for because they would never have been flagged in the first place.
I think that's great advice. I think this is it's not necessarily an exciting part of cloud computing. It's just one of these things we have to deal with, just like traffic laws are not an exciting part of driving. But if we don't obey them, then we're putting ourselves and our fellow drivers at risk, and also we're putting ourselves in financial jeopardy because we're going to be paying fines. So going forward, this is going to be an absolute necessity that we kind of understand this space. I think law firms are going to start to emerge that focus on these sorts of regulations and kind of understanding how they work. And I think we're going to get technical and business analysts that are going to focus on this as well. We certainly have them at my firm, and I think they're going to be kind of a growing demand going forward.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because the GDPR actually has an opportunity to give CIOs and your internal IT department a chance to really embrace and be viewed as an innovation leader inside your organization. Because by default, you would think that GDPR compliance would be a reason for the IT department to say, don't use this cloud service, don't use this, don't use that, which we know they've done for years since cloud computing has started, and they've been trying to block the marketing department or sales of product teams from doing new innovative technologies in the cloud. The problem is they aren't stopping them from doing that. So they can't use this as now I can stop you. What they should be doing is they should be using this as, hey, tell you what, I've actually looked into how you can be GDPR compliant using this service, and this service. So now you can use those services. So let's go do it. And by the way, we can help you do it right and do it secure. If they take that attitude, they can start being someone who helps the company innovate and really change their outcome and change the CIO's role in the overall innovation and new direction for the company.
Absolutely. I couldn't say it better myself. That's a great way to close the show.
Yeah, true, very true. Thank you, James, and thank you, Dave. It's been great talking to you guys on a very hot topic at the moment. I'm sure it's just going to get hotter, and no doubt we should do another show, maybe on the 24th of May or something, just to see how everyone's sort of faring up before D-Day really arrives. Although we'll have to work that timing out, because I'm almost a day ahead of you guys or so. So it's we'll have to work out how that's going to work. But thanks again for being part of the show. I really appreciate that, James. It's great.
Oh, you bet. It's a pleasure to be with you guys, and hope you have a wonderful day, and hope everyone watching this show realizes GDPR can be a positive for them.
Excellent. Thanks again, Dave. Really appreciate you being part of the Australia show this week.
I'm always happy to be here, man.
Well, thanks again, guys. It's great to have you part of the Australia show this week. And thanks, everyone, for watching. We hope you enjoyed this show on GDPR. It's certainly a hot topic at the moment. And you can reach James on Twitter, which is at Staten7. You can reach David on Twitter, which is at David Linthicum, and myself on Twitter, which is at Nelson_Hilliard. So remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future shows. Thanks again for watching.